So, welcome, Heather. We're delighted to have you here today on The Quiet Part Out Loud. Fearless trailblazer, influential leader, innovator, and always pushing the boundaries. I think those are some words that have been used to describe Heather, and certainly your long and illustrious career journey attributes or speaks to your incredible impact, not only here in our community, but broadly throughout our country. And before we get into some leadership questions and reflections for you, we like to kick things off with a bit of a lighter question, one that is maybe cause for some reflection and thinking about, gosh, what would it be? But if someone were to make a movie about your career journey, what would it be called?
Well, I'd like to think it would be Mission Possible.
Because
Because I think, too many of us think that things are impossible. And I guess I would want to show that you actually can have a successful career. You can raise a non-dysfunctional family. And I know that's really rare, but I think it's possible. And also do some great things for the community. And so to me, it would be about all the things we can do. The challenges along the way, hopefully inspirational, but ultimately just how we can work together and the inspiration that can create. So yeah, it would be a very inspirational drama com.
I love it. I just have the Mission Impossible music soundtrack in my head. And I'm thinking you would be the Tom Cruise of this movie.
Well,
you would be the star of your
you
movie.
do your own stunts.
No, I'm too old to do that now. Yeah.
So what would the story be? Because, what's beyond the bio? What can you tell us about your career and your life that maybe the audience doesn't know about you?
So, these things would be interwoven throughout the entire movie, but basically, a girl growing up in Brentwood, Alberta, Calgary, Alberta, oldest of 5 kids, 2 working parents, most of the time a chaotic shit show at home, where I was kind of bossy and crabby and competitive. But
you learned your leadership skills early on. The eldest of 5 kids.
Yeah.
You gotta demonstrate some strong leadership.
Yeah, you do. And so, became very independent at a young age, which kind of set the stage for everything else. Certainly, I went to my background's in technology, which makes me a very rare beast, in that those were the days of floppy disks and when computer programmers were like females, computer programmers were like unicorns, like honestly. And so it really did, though. And so I'm not so much of a coder or a programmer. I'm more of a people person. And so I realized early on that, there's just no way. I mean, this is just not gonna work. And so, like that technology background, though, gave me a real upper hand, a real step forward that differentiated me from a lot of other leaders, because I was female, had technology, and I actually wasn't too nerdy. So from there, I had a great career, most memorable really being at Suncor early in my career when I was able to have 2 kids. They were so supportive. They recognized true leadership when they saw it. I was 28 years old, and they're just like, "You're going on the fast track, girl. We're going to put you on the fast track for leadership." And so I had tons of opportunities there, installing computers, microcomputers, and the first network in Calgary. I mean, like things that, that were really kind of set me up for success. And then they tapped me to do to work with the board to help with key performance indicators for the organization. And it was just one of those moments where you go, hey, you know what? If you really want to, and you put your hand up for lots of stuff, you can pretty much do anything. And even though it can be scary at times, which of course it was, because delving into the deep end of things gives me exhilaration, but I'm terrified at the same time. Yeah. So anyway, from Suncor, being young and inexperienced, I basically became impatient and thought, I can do more. So after 5 years, found myself really impatient and overly ambitious, to be quite frank. And I happened to be in the fortunate position where I had some great skill sets, and I started my own IT management consulting company and did some work for Petro-Canada, running $20 million projects, and did some work at Enerplus, which was a organization I came back to later. So after a few years of that and dabbling in this and that, I then went to a spectacularly dysfunctional oil and gas company in Denver. It actually was located here, but it originated in Denver. And it was kind of my masterclass on what not to do.
Wow, spectacularly dysfunctional.
Spectacularly dysfunctional. So that gave me the opportunity to go to a functional organization, and that was Enerplus. I walked in there as a VP, and within a year was promoted to a senior vice president at 37 years old. One of the few female senior VPs in the energy sector. Felt very fortunate. So I had IT, administration, all the stuff people didn't want to do. It's kind of like, give it to Heather. She'll do. But I also got strategy. I also got performance management, so it was a good package, a good profile. But I also helped with, helping with strategy and board orientation and getting board packages together. And so, it gave me a lot of confidence that way. Plus, we did $7 billion of transactions in 5 years. And so just integrating companies was like a huge piece of work and a lot of complexity, right? And so, those were some fantastic days. I just loved my career at Enerplus. But, sooner or later, things come to an end. And, it was time for me to kind of pivot and do some other things because I was truly interested in philanthropy. And, it really started with my mom having cancer when I'd work graduated from Enerplus because I was 46 years old, believe it or not. Because I was just determined that there were other things I could be doing. And she's going through cancer, horrific situation. Tom Baker Cancer Center was way underbuilt. People lined up in the hallways like cattle and poor equipment in the basement, and the doctors and nurses were frustrated. The patients were beyond frustrated. The systems were antiquated. And so I saw that. And, I'd sneakily go out and buy, because people would be sitting in waiting rooms for hours. I'd go out and buy the little digital, I don't even know what they're called anymore, where people could actually watch a movie on a little tiny screen. Yeah. And some new chairs in the waiting room. It was just like that bad. So I was determined that something had to be done about that. And so I joined Alberta Cancer Foundation on the board. And just so I could kind of get better understanding of what was really going on and maybe help me prepare for what I knew was my calling in life, which was to basically knock down that cancer center and build a brand new cancer center that was desperately, desperately needed. And so kind of on my journey, I ended up getting a cancer diagnosis too. And so that really was a wake-up call. It's like, okay, you know what? This is my calling. This is what I'm meant to do on this earth. And so 14 years, myself and a few other people worked to get the new cancer center built. Yeah. The Arthur J. E. Child that opened in October 2024 was due to a lot of hard work by a lot of people. Yeah. And Nuvyn, you're included in that. Yeah. We worked together on a campaign, the Own Cancer campaign, we wanted to raise $250 million, but we raised $298 million.
Exactly.
I know.
Huge accomplishment.
It is my life work. I just know that, which is interesting. So that cancer center being built was a real source of pride for me and for many other people. Like, certain of us had fought for it in the background, trying not to piss too many people off because we needed the government on side in order to give us the money. And it was a $1.4 billion investment. We're not talking cheap either.
Yeah.
So it was a significant accomplishment. Really proud of that. Really proud of the people I worked with. It was an incredible incredible opportunity.
That will have tremendous impact on the lives of so many, not just here in Calgary, but beyond. There's been a couple of themes as you've been talking about your story and your experience that kind of emerges for me. One is this concept of patience, whether you have, as she laughs,
Yeah.
patience is a virtue. But this concept that, when you were at Suncor, you got impatient, and as a determined, ambitious leader, how do you balance the desire for change and to plow through and to want to do more with sometimes the company's pace or lack thereof that aligns with your goals?
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring those together?
Not easily. Honestly, I think my advice to people now that are in that situation where it's like, I just got to jump ship. I've just got to make a change. I'm frustrated or I'm impatient. It's not happening fast enough. I have a couple of regrets. And one of them is that I left Suncor too early because I think it had a lot more to offer. But I was impatient and thought and so I did really well. I mean, that's not the issue. I just think I could have given it more time. And so my recommendation to people that are kind of experiencing that frustration is to really think about what your career goals are and talk to someone in your organization, either, typically your boss, and just say, look, is there a project I can take on? Like, something kind of just to re-jazz you and re-engage you. Or if it's just not working and you've been waiting long enough, then it's time for you to kind of look at some serious options. But don't jump ship until you've kind of figured out what it is that you want to do and how you're going to make that transition.
Kind of a balance between ambition and self-awareness and that sort of thing. Like knowing when it's time to go or knowing when it's time to pump the brakes a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
But I would always give the organization, unless your organization's completely dysfunctional, you just want to get the hell out, that's a different thing. But, talk to them. Maybe there's a up and coming project that you could kind of, get some experience in and rejuvenate and re-energize you. Just, I would just say try that before you jump ship.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to look at your career in technology that has changed drastically and also changes the way that the working environment supports particularly women on their career paths, whether that is the advent of Zoom and Teams, which we now all despise, sitting in front of a screen our entire day. But it has really revolutionized the opportunities around work culture. What have you experienced, and what have you seen in the context of dynamic cultures, like where people thrive, and how has technology helped to support that or hindered it?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've thought about this a lot, especially with AI happening right now. AI is going to be one of the most amazing revolutions we've ever had in technology. And it is happening as we speak. And it is way further progressed than we even know. I believe that, technology is a true enabler for companies. And if they don't get their act together, then they're going to be left in the dust. But it's up to each and every one of us, and especially me sitting on multiple boards, to stay, kind of in touch with what's going on. And I delve into it myself. But I also think, during COVID, it was an enabler. But after COVID, it kind of helped. It didn't help us with our team dynamics, right? And with organizational culture, and with when you're trying to engage people and for them to come together and build a team, it's really, really difficult to do that when they don't want to come to the office. And it's just more convenient to be at home. And anyway, so I believe in flexibility, and especially for women, men too, obviously. But we have to face the reality of, if you want to progress in your career, then you damn well better make sure that you're connecting with your teams, right? Not over a screen, right? And so technology is an enabler, but it can also be an excuse.
Culture, camaraderie, goal sharing. this sense of teamwork and those
Mhm.
team dynamics that are so critical to achieving your goals.
Mhm.
Yeah, it puts a wall between the connections, right? So it
Mhm.
kind of gets in the way of that team building and networking that you should be doing in your role.
Right. The networking piece is absolutely one of the most important things that I've learned throughout my career is that if you can, create some really great networks, then it opens up doors that are incredible opportunities. But if you do it by email or Zoom, it doesn't create that same sense of I guess together or trust
Right.
and engagement.
You know, I read an interesting stat about networking recently, and that was that over 90% of people in the C-suite attribute networking opportunities to their ability to achieve their role.
Mm-hmm.
And yet 30% of women in the level just below the C-suite feel that they have enough networking opportunities or really even understand how to network.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we bridge this gap? If people attribute networking to their career progress and credit those opportunities, yet women feel unable to or not supported in these networking opportunities, how do we become more intentional about networking?
Well, Access Connects is the perfect example. Thank you very much.
Great
for
segue. On that note, tell us about Access Connects. I'm so curious though about the origin story of
Right.
Access.
Yeah.
You've had this long illustrious career. You're serving on all of these boards, and then you thought, but yet there's still more you wanted to do.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Well, you know what? It was interesting. I'd like to, at some point in time, talk about Board Ready Women because it is actually what led us to Access Connects. I was frustrated with, someone having a, Board Ready Women, or at that time it was called Women on Boards, and we had to change it because of, copyright, blah, 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 all that kind of BS. But there was confusion out there because there are people holding dinners about women on boards. And so people are going, oh, is that your dinner? I'm going, no. It was Jenna Case. And I just said, Jenna, can we work together on this? Like, I mean, there's so much confusion out there about what's going on with all of these, all these networks, all these initiatives. How do we work together to bring these things together to create less confusion and create a more solid network?
Mm-hmm.
And so she was experiencing the same thing, as was Marnie Smith, as was Katie Smith. And so the four of us got together to talk about how do we collaborate and bring the knowledge of all the amazing networks that are in Calgary for women together. How do we do that? And then on top of that, how do we help women on their career journeys, because they're going to, so there's over 100 women's network organizations in Calgary, nonprofit, to help other women. But a lot of women don't know they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, built a website, put all the, the networks there, kind of what their purpose was so people could navigate that better. So that's the first thing. Find the network that suits where you are in your career or what, skill sets that you're focusing on or areas of talent. And secondly, then create a larger network that can come together to support one another across, because we all work together in the business. There's cross-functional things happening all the time. So find a way to bring these people together and help them with their career journey. So it's one thing to kind of have, Young Women in Energy, which Katie Smith has kind of been leading for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're doing their thing, but they also need to meet other networks so that they can expand their network and the opportunities that would be possible for them. So that was the beginning of Access Connects. But we also knew that we had to find a way to recognize and profile and celebrate the incredible women we have in our city. And so I'm not kidding. We met in October. No, our first meeting was in June. By November 2019, we had created a website. We had nominations set up for the Calgary Influential Women in Business Awards. We had found sponsorship for the CIWB Awards. We had arranged the whole Hyatt for 500 guests, and I wanted 1,000, but 500 I settled for. And we did that off the side of our desks. Each one of us had a full-time job, but we did it in, honestly, 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
And so, again, when you're really passionate about something, I just want people to know that even though it's hard, it can be very, very satisfying to see the impact that something like this can make.
And you know what I love about this story is that instead of taking a competitive approach, you collaborated and you worked together, and it became this really fantastic thing versus pushing other people away and saying, they're doing the same thing as me. I love that the approach was, hey, let's do this together.
Right.
And it became bigger and better.
And you know what? And let people do what works best for them. I mean, this isn't about competition. Let's bring them together, celebrate, and create networks that are beneficial to all women and men, quite frankly. So,
So Heather, not only are you the founder of Access Connects, but you are the co-founder of Board Ready Women. So can you tell us a little bit about Board Ready Women and how that started?
Yeah, you know what? So the Cancer Center, as I said, was, kind of what I thought was my life's mission, but I had another one. And that was to blow up the old boys club boards that were out there in this city. It was a really sad state of affairs because, here I was, and I'm thinking about my own personal goals. Here I was, a very seasoned executive that had a lot of experience, but I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a CA, and I wasn't an engineer. So because I didn't have those skill sets, I was not going to be asked to be on an energy board. And you know what? It's almost laughable. Like, it really is. It's like, how ridiculous is this? We want diverse thinking at the table. We want people to bring in different skill sets, different perspectives, but they want everybody to be the same. So myself and Jen Corey and Linda Holhall took on the big task of starting Board Ready Women, which back in 2018, and with the objective of getting more women on boards. And what I was hearing a lot about was, well, there's just not enough qualified women, which was just absolute bullshit. And so we wanted to create awareness about the tremendous talent that we have in our city, and about how important it is to have those diverse voices at the table. And, we've been really successful. Initially, in 2018, the statistics were 12%. In Alberta, 12% women on boards. 12%. It's just pathetic. And now it's 23%. And I think we should take full credit for that. Okay, all right. Not full credit for it.
Absolutely.
But certainly it has made an impact, because what we're doing with Access Connects too, right? It's creating awareness, and people are going, aha, we're not getting this right? If we want to create more value, we have to do something different. And so if companies have to start thinking that way. So it's been a tremendous, 400 members. We're doing it across Canada. We do these quarterly sessions. We offer a fantastic network of men and women, and it is honestly one of my we're hugely proud of that accomplishment as well, because it's, this is all about, again, making those connections. Those networks are the most important thing that you can create in your career. And also, let's just move outside of careers, like just in your personal life, right? You're going to need support along the way. So, yeah.
A little bit of a pivot, but when you're telling your story, it sounds like in your career, you may or may not have been the only woman in the room in many cases. So were there any occasions where you said you didn't feel like you were limited, but were there any occasions where you felt like because you were a woman, something happened, or because you were a woman, you were left out of the room? And can you talk about maybe how you handled that?
Well, I mean, of course, there's times when, being an executive in an organization means you're at the table, right? I wasn't at the table as a VP, which is why I pushed to become a senior vice president, because, HR had to be at the table. IT had to be at the table. Strategy and performance management had to be at the table. And so I pushed for that because it was very male dominated. I did have another female VP. She wasn't part of the executive group, but there was another senior VP. And so we actually had, a really great opportunity to share and to collaborate and to figure out how to make sure that these opportunities were open to us. But sometimes you just have to, poke the bear in the eye a little bit in a kind way. Not really, but just, it's called awareness and saying, you know what, that's not acceptable, guys. And gals, whatever the situation happens to be, in a very logical, non-emotional, transparent kind of way. And they will see that that's the case. But I haven't had to do it very often where I've just kind of, had to do anything other than that, because it is about relationships and building trust. And when they have that, they're more willing to, they being the teams, they're more willing to give you those types of opportunities. Yeah.
Right. What I love also about the journey of access is the role that men have played in supporting it, in advocating for it, that there is a Male Champion Award as part of the Calgary Influential Women in Business Awards. So talk to us a little bit about the role of men in the journey, the professional journey for women in leadership. Because so often there's this is about women, like men over here. But that hasn't been part of the story of access.
Not at all, actually, because, I was really fortunate in my career as I had a lot of male mentors. I really did. And I never felt held back, ever. And I mean that. And, a lot of people find that strange. But for me, when you build a trust relationship with someone, whether they're male or female, it's amazing the things that can happen, right? And so I had some tremendous opportunities, some tremendous male champions along the way. And they helped open doors for me and gave me ideas and mentored me. And so when I'm seeing what's going on with, this real kind of division, it really didn't make sense to me, because we need to work together in order for us to be successful. This isn't about women, women, of course, helping women, but men can also help, and they want to help. And, there's always going to be the old boys club that we call it, that, that just keep doing the same thing over and over again and call it insanity. But we now understand through Access Connects and the awareness that you guys as a team have brought to Calgary about the impact. We are getting more and more male support. I mean, we're seeing them show up at more events. We celebrate them at the CIWB Awards because we want to show that this is a joint effort. It's not just women or just men. How do we do this together? Again, that collaboration model.
And I love that, as part of Board Ready Women, you've been a strong advocate for 50% gender diversity on boards. And we can get into the progress that Alberta has made along the way. But even with Access Connects, we have a board that's 50% men. And that's an important statement.
No, I agree, Nuvyn. It's one of those things, right? In order for us to create the opportunities for women, we need our male allyship to say, this diverse thinking, this diverse dialogue is actually very helpful in the value of my business. We need men in our corner to help us create these opportunities and getting more women into decision-making roles. And so the intent was to network, to celebrate, and also to help women on their overall career journeys, right? With some of the things that you guys are very familiar with, right? Leadership forums and the lunch with the leaders and the various career development dialogues that happen.
So the Calgary Herald recently published an article featuring you entitled community trailblazer Heather Culbert, driven to get stuff done. Where in the first sentence, they mention the Gashido effect.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know what? Again, because of my personality and when I have a project going on or something that I want to get done, it's always an 80% plan. I don't plan for every scenario. I don't plan for, all the various components. I just literally kind of intuitively
Mhm.
I either make a physical list based on the complexity, or intuitively I know that I can adapt as I go. But it's called Gashido, stands for get shit done. Because I think there's just way too much navel gazing going on. I
Mhm.
think people need to understand that you're never going to get it right.
Mhm.
So just be open to the fact that you're going to be flexible. You're going to be fluid. Things are going to change. You're not going to be able to kind of stick with the original plan all the
Yeah.
time. But if you sit and navel gaze and plan everything out to 100%, it's going to have changed by the time you get going. So
Right.
just get started.
Get shit
Get
done.
shit done,
Yeah.
because it's about execution and it's about being flexible. And so it really has been my motto my entire life,
Right.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
There's something to be said, though, because so often we spend so much time in the process of perfection and trying to have everything perfect by the time you launch.
Hmm.
I think about our podcast that we filmed with Manjeet Minhas, where she said, goals are good, but write your goals in pencil because they're going to change.
Absolutely.
And do you feel now, either with this work culture or this environment, or whether it's generational, there is too much focus on that plan and needing it to be perfected by the time you get going?
Hmm. This fear of failure, right? And again, you should be fearful from time to time. I mean, I'm not saying like just wipe that off the planet. I mean, there's reasons why you need to do some planning, because you don't want to fail, right? But failure sometimes gives you the opportunity to learn things. I mean, I've failed in various things. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you have to get rolling and you have to be brave sometimes, And I wouldn't say sometimes, I'd say a lot of times,
Mhm.
because I don't know what I'm stepping into half the time. It's like, okay, so can you prepare yourself for everything? No, you can't. And so you have to sometimes be brave and accept the fact that you're not going to get it right.
Right.
And make sure that the people that are supporting you understand that. So don't just go off and do it without talking to your leadership team or whatever and say, this is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm anticipating is going to happen. If it doesn't work, are you good for me to kind of and you know what? There's not going to be anybody that says, no, I want you to go back and do more navel gazing.
Right.
Go do that.
Yeah.
So, plan to 75, 80% and get going.
Get
Yeah.
going.
Mhm.
On the note of Heatherisms, you mentioned work graduating. So
Mhm.
you work graduated, you retired from your
Mhm.
career, and
Mhm.
then you moved into philanthropy and you moved into all of these board roles.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to, someone who's mid-career or sort of leaning towards, thinking about that work graduation stage?
Mhm.
What did you experience when you did that, and what advice would you give?
Well, I mean, my problem in my life, a Heatherism, is I tend to say yes a lot. So my first word of advice would be, really think about why you're doing it, and really think about what you're going to say yes to, because you can really get yourself going down a road that you didn't ever intend to happen, right? And so be clear in your own mind about what you want to achieve. The cancer piece was something that evolved over time. Certainly the board, my passion for getting more women on boards has certainly evolved over time. But I did say yes to a couple of boards that I regretted, right? Because I either wasn't a good fit, or I didn't do proper due diligence. I was, maybe not in the right mindset. And so don't say yes to everything that comes along. Be clear about what what it is that you'd like, and then make sure you do your due diligence and find out what is a culture about. Culture is the driver of everything, right? Is a culture, because you can't change culture, right? You can maybe help as a board member understand culture and perhaps help them kind of move along the spectrum a little bit, but it's really difficult to change culture. So really do some due diligence and dig in.
Yeah. And then to reflect on whether that is complementing and enhancing your professional ambition, and
Right.
your goals, and where you see yourself. And I want to talk a little bit about support and the support that you had, whether that's familial, in a relationship with your partner, from your kids. You know, you've been a leader in so many areas and have accomplished so much. And it takes a team. So who's on your team?
I have a tremendous husband, as you know, who has been very, very supportive, which is, and we both were executives, right? And so that sometimes was difficult because we were both in the energy sector in executive positions. And so there wasn't a lot of pillow talk, right? Because you can't come home and say, God damn, that deal fell through, or, this and this. So there's times when you can kind of, explore things, that aren't necessarily confidential. But most of the time when we're in that business, it was just, couldn't talk about stuff.
Right.
But he was always there to support me. He supported my ambition. He wasn't looking to be competitive in any way, and he championed me along the way, which was very helpful. But I also had some people, in the business that I was in that would kind of, I could vent to, I could get their support, or, especially when you're dealing with complex issues in an organization, you have to go and talk to people. You have to go and understand their perspective and how you can create success and win-wins for everyone, right? So it really depends on the situation. It's either my friends, my husband. I mean, now Mike and I can talk about pretty much anything except for a couple of boards we're on. But, for the most part, it's about creating that network of people you really trust.
Yeah.
And it includes family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And asking for help, that's such a hard, hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing for me to do, to say, I don't know how to navigate through this next step and I need help. You're on my speed dial for when I think of,
well, I think we talk a lot.
Yes.
You're on my speed dial.
I think sometimes leadership can be lonely, and there is this element that you have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And most of the time we don't.
No.
And we hope for the best and we make the best decision that we can with the information that we have.
Exactly.
But sometimes you need someone to lean on and say, I need help. Help me out with that. And creating your community is so critical to success.
Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
And it's so interesting when you get to that level where you're in a room with executives and you realize that everyone's just trying to figure it out. No one really knows what they're doing 100% of the time. So,
and I mean, I think that's a sign of a really good leader.
Yeah.
Is that you're not going to know the answers all the time, right? And so count on your team to help you.
Yeah.
Admit when you don't know. Talk about, I need more time. I need some more insights. But don't kind of go, oh, yeah, I got this handled, because people know you don't have it handled.
Yeah.
Believe me. So, a lot of it is being humble and trusting and, collaborative. It's not about doing everything on your own, right? Yeah.
What's the advice that you give young women on their professional journeys that you sometimes need to give yourself?
Okay, well, let's start with patience, because, honestly, I am a very, very impatient person. And so that's why I try when I'm speaking to think about how it should go, not how I did it, right? Because patience is a really important piece. It can open up doors as well, but there's times when you don't want to be patient, or there's reasons why. And then the other thing would be self-awareness. emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
That's something that is developed over a period of time. You're not born with it, unfortunately. And a lot of people still don't have it, even in their 50s, 60s. I'm just going to say it. But emotional intelligence is the one thing that creates that connection. So if you can read a room, if you can anticipate questions and have them ready to be for a response, if you can make those kinds of connections ahead of time,
Mhm.
your life is going to be a hell of a lot easier. But it is about how do you create connections? Because connections are the things that allow you to open doors and help make things happen.
Right.
Right.
And to have that emotional intelligence, you need to give yourself the opportunity to reflect
Mm-hmm.
and to learn from your experiences. Like, oh, I could have handled that differently, or did I, bring my best self to that opportunity or to that conversation. But some of that also is the permission to kind of just decompress.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decompress?
Okay, well, thank you for that, because when I work graduated, I was an absolute bloody mess. I mean, I was completely burnt out. It was one of the reasons I gave a year's notice, by the way. I didn't kind of just abandon the organization because I loved the organization. I was doing it for my own health and my own, my journey, right? And so I was completely burnt out, and I found a holistic approach to basically recharging my batteries. And so my daughter has now started Vitality Biomed, which does exactly that. So it's a combination of holistic, naturopath, and I guess functional medicine approach that really allows people to, and it uses scientific and advanced diagnostics to help people calm down, calm your nervous system. What kinds of supplements do you need? What kinds of things do you need in order to do that? And for me, it is a gift from heaven, because I don't know how to decompress, right? And so having these things available have been incredible. So I'm of course advising her and helping her along the way, but it's new to Calgary,
Mhm.
and it's what every woman needs. Every woman is going to need to decompress, and men. We get a lot of men at the clinic.
And
Anyway.
learn what works for you.
And learn what works
Yeah.
for you, because it doesn't work for everybody,
Yeah.
right? So anyway, so decompressing, also finding time for yourself, right? Putting some time for yourself in your calendar.
Yeah.
Which I've never been good at. Ever.
It's hard.
Because family first, right?
Yeah.
Career, important, very important. But you always somehow make it to the bottom of the list. And that's not right, because people are counting on you to be on, right?
Yeah.
And so how are you constantly on if you're not allowing yourself the time to decompress, right? So yeah, no.
And I think as women, we're hard on ourselves to be like, family first, career, you're in a relationship,
Yeah.
you have to maintain the household, and you are at the bottom of the list, whether
Right.
that's mental
That's
health
true.
and wellness,
That's true.
your your diet, exercise, all of the things that we follow on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
that we scroll through, and it's like, oh yeah, I should be doing that, or I should journal. But sometimes you have to give yourself that permission to
Mhm.
take the time for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Massage is also a great.
Massage is great. Yeah. To wrap up, I'm going to ask you what your top 3 favorite books are, or if you're
Mhm.
not a book girly, podcast, top 3
Mhm.
favorite books.
Well, my favorite at the moment is Let Them by Mel Robbins. And everybody's been talking about it. And I am a huge fan, because I tend to take everything on and think it's my fault, or I could have done that differently, or why didn't I say that, or why didn't I do that? And not everybody's driven by the same motivation, right? It's like what what drives people, and what are their personalities, and so many combinations, and what's happened in their day to make them the way they are, and what's their story. And so sometimes you just have to let it go, right? And we say that so easily. It's like, well, just let it go. And it's not easy. But she gives a lot of great ideas on how to make that happen, right? How do you just say, okay, I can't do anything about that. I can't control that situation. Just let them do what it is that they're going to do. And sometimes it's very, very difficult. Very difficult.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Heather. Very insightful conversations. I'm going to take away the need to decompress, have a little patience, but not lose sight of those ultimate objectives and the Gashido effect.
Yep. And always think big, right?
Right. Well, that's what I believe anyway. Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.